Thank you for joining us for this MIA overview. We are doing a presentation today that will cover just specifically the Master of International Affairs and the Master of Public Health, which is just a short little portion of that. We're going to get started with an ability for you to send us some chat questions and for us to answer some questions at the end when you unmute. And that way we can be sure to just visually be able to see you with those questions as you talk to us just one-on-one. So let's start with our presenters today. So I'm Catherine Meyer, Director of Admissions and Recruitment, and I'm going to kind of give the overview of most of this and then have Matt Upton come in for the Career and Student Services sections. And he will present on the internship, the career opportunities, some of the student service elements like the leadership program, the writing program, elements of our speaker series, and cover that material with you. And then I've got my GA, grad assistant, Dylan Armstrong. He's actually an MPSA student, but he can chime in where it's relevant for the involvement for the students in the life here. And then I've got Aaron Rochow joining us as an MIA student who is studying diplomacy and the conflict and development. So they'll be doing some input as we go along, and then obviously they're here to answer your questions. So the agenda that we're going to cover is talking about the degree and the support highlights. And so we'll start with the MIA itself and what it looks like, including a little bit about the 5-year programs, the Master of Public Health that we have as a 3-year program. And then we're going to hit the tracks and concentrations of the MIA, how you can supplement it with some Texas A&M courses or our graduate certificates, give an overview of what the curriculum looks like, and then also talk about the Capstone projects, which you do in your final semester here. Then Matt will come in and talk about the student services and employment. I'll come back to do the application process and our recent statistics and what that incoming class looks like this year. Also talking about our costs and what our financial aid looks like when we grant that for every incoming MIA student. And then again, we'll end with a little bit about that student involvement in life and get some of our students to come in and answer your questions for that. So as always, what's on your mind, be sure to ask us those questions or save them until the end. So we'll start with just an overview in this one slide of what is the Bush School of Government and Public Service. So we are the smallest school at Texas A&M University. It is here on this college campus in College Station, Texas. We are a graduate school only. We began in 1997 when we opened, when Texas A&M was granted the George Bush Library and Museum. So we wanted to open a school in George Bush's honor as well that would keep preparing students for that public service field and giving back to society. So we now have just over 2,000 alumni. We started with class sizes that were numbering about 20 to 30, and we've now grown to bringing in somewhere around 180 students between our different programs on campus here. It's a lot more than that if you include our online enrollments. But we offer 4 on-campus degrees. That's the Master of Public Service and Administration, Master of International Affairs, Master of International Policy, and our newest is the Master of International Affairs with the Master of Public Health. We also offer 4 grad certificates and 1 online degree, which is the Executive Master of Public Service. And you're going to notice that I failed to mention, there is a new degree, but it's not technically on campus. And that's the MIP-DC, which is opening this spring. So I'll talk about that one shortly. I'll mention it now, but we'll talk about it in our next webinar, which doesn't happen for another 2 weeks. But we're preparing students for a career in nonprofits, for federal government, state, local government, government contracting, private industry. Some do go on to continue for their extended education, maybe doing a PhD or some law degree, but that's not really our push. Most of our students do go out into the workforce, into the public service fields. So we're going to focus on the on-campus MIA option that we have here. And this is a 2-year, 48 credit hour degree. Typically students are doing 12 credit hours at a time. A lot of times if you're comparing to other schools, they're 36 credit hours, maybe 39. So we are a bit longer, but that does allow us to get a lot more niche development in student specialties. And it includes the aspect of a required internship and some other elements. So you are getting a very robust education for your time here. And you're also building a degree that fits your interests. So we bring in a lot of different majors, and it depends on where they want to go with those interests, or maybe they just took a little bit of a sidestep and they're now pursuing what they were interested in college, maybe not what they majored in college. So you can build on your experiences with your tracks, with your concentrations. I didn't put it, but even your internships and your relationship building that you're going to have here with your faculty and colleagues. And again, you can take those electives elsewhere at Texas A&M. So really being able to develop a specialty. You're going to receive faculty and career advising along the way. So if you come in with, I already know what I want to do, and you just keep following that plan, that's great. But others are listening to the different employers that are brought in, listening to those talks, coming in and asking questions of their faculty advisors in really trying to figure out where they want to go with this degree. And we will help you with that. You can earn a graduate certificate to highlight your study if you so choose. I mention this because we do have students who, let's say, graduate off cycle and they're a December graduate. Well, we don't bring in students until the fall. And so they have a semester sometimes where they can just use that effort to do a graduate certificate. And we can count up to 12 credit hours of a certificate that they've earned. Or you can come in and as you're starting the MIA program, at least with the CHLS and in the nonprofit, you can concurrently enroll with those and get 2 credentials. Not only is your MIA degree, but you're also doing a graduate certificate. I will say the caveat of that is for the certificate in Advanced International Affairs, you do have to be admitted and started that coursework before you enroll with the MIA. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. So more details, we can get on that at a later time. So you're applying your studies in a relevant summer internship of your choosing. So you will have some leads that we can provide through Simplicity and other methods with our faculty advisors and career services staff. But you are ultimately the decider of which ones do you apply to, which ones do you follow up with, where do you want to be located, what industry do you want to be located. And then if you get a paid internship, great. If you get one that's unpaid, then we have some scholarship opportunities to help you with that. And I'll cover that in a little bit. So you will get to do the summer internship, or for this program, you can also instead choose to do your foreign language study. So one of the graduation requirements for the MIA is that you have to pass a spoken foreign language exam in order to graduate. And a lot of times the intention for students is to work on that language outside of the classroom and really get proficient enough where they know they can pass the test well, but they get busy and they don't have time to work on the language. And so they get a little nervous about being able to pass that test. And in that case, they can choose to work on the foreign language study. In that case, they may be going abroad and working in a foreign language at a university program. And so they can kind of uniquely study for that language for those 2 months or so and come back and take their test when they get here in the fall. But that is completely left up to you which one you want to pursue. And sometimes people will apply for options of both and see what pans out for them for that semester. But you will also, in that final year of your study, do a semester-long capstone project with your classmates, which we will talk about later. And then additionally, sometimes you need a little bit more flexibility with your courses, and maybe coming here to College Station doesn't work for all of those, particularly if you're trying to navigate a little bit of a job on the side for this. So you can take a couple of courses through the online option, consultation with your advisor for that to make sure it's okay. But if you do an online course for a couple of them, you will have an additional cost because it is done through a Office of Extended Education here, and so it's a $1,500 additional cost. Now, right now, just comment, our students have actually, they're doing a hybrid format for their coursework for the most part, so they can be here in class, and then at the same time, some of their classmates be doing that in Zoom. So that's a different aspect than someone who's completely taking a class online. It just has a little bit more constraints because of the cost involved in handling that technology. So let's talk about within the Master of International Affairs, there's a kind of a side option for Texas A&M University undergrads. And if they're in the Department of International Studies or the Department of Economics, they can pursue what is called our 3+2 or 5-year program. And those students, when they're coming into Texas A&M as a freshman, are going to start working with their undergraduate advisors in aligning their coursework. So as their major and they're working on the credits involved for that department, they are taking care of their necessary classes so that by the time that they're a junior and they hit somewhere around that 70 to 80 hour mark, they are applying to us. And they enroll with us that following fall where they're somewhere around that 102 to 103 hours. And then once they're enrolled with us, that 18 credit hours in their senior year means that INTA courses are also going to count towards those undergrads. So they're double counting some of those efforts. So apply with your internal app. So it's different than the Unicast app that everyone else does because you're still an active undergrad student. So look for that internal application, but all the other requirements are the same. So we're still looking for letters of rec, statement of purpose, all those kinds of materials. But the benefit of this is not only you saving time by double counting some courses, but you're also paying the undergrad rates in your first year. So you will save a little money in that aspect, and then over the summer between your first and second year, you're converted to the G7 rates, the Bushel rates, and now you pay our fees and so forth. We expect to enroll, I put 4 to 10 students. We were holding it around 5 students, and this year for some reason we kind of jumped on that and went with about 10 students. So I would say on average we're usually looking between 5 to 6 students bringing in out of our 90 goal for the MIA. This year we just went a little bit higher than that and actually brought in around 10. It's very hard to say no to really great Texas A&M students who are well prepared, they have their language, they've done some study abroad, and they're just a natural fit for this program. So if it shoe fits, then we will enroll those that we feel are the most competitive for that. Now the new program that we have is a combined degree, and this is a combination of the Master of International Affairs and a Master of Public Health. But in order to get into this program, you have to apply to both programs at the same time and be admitted to both. So we will have our first MIA student come into our program from the public health side this spring. So this person had already started the program and is coming to us after 1.5 years of their coursework, and she'll spend the next 1.5 years in our coursework. So it's a 3-year, 72 total credit hours for both degrees. Again, you start with the MPH program first for that first 1.5 years, and then you come to us for the second 1.5 years. When you're with MPH, you have 2 options for your emphasis areas. That's the health policy and management or health promotion and community health services. And then once you come into our program, then you get the gamut of what I'm going to talk about in a few minutes with the concentrations and tracks that we offer. So you're just shortening the program a tad bit by combining some classes, but you're still getting the full MIA experience. And when you enroll with us, that's when our scholarship money will kick in. So public health will handle their aspect for that 1.5 years, and then our part will come in. If the MPH summer practicum course that you're involved in on their side involves an international topic experience, it can also work for our internship requirement. And then same idea, students have to complete at least 1 capstone course in one of our 2 departments and just make sure that it works. And that's just a combination of working with your undergrad advisors, sorry, not undergrad, your graduate advisor at MPH along with your faculty advisor in the MIA. But remember, Bushel funding only applies with us, so you'll just have to work with MPH as we go along that. So the executive level degrees, this is the only place I'm going to mention this here, and I just didn't want to glaze over them, but I will have a future webinar that will talk a little more in detail for this. But these executive level degrees are also part of the International Affairs Department. But there's a Master of International Policy that we instituted a couple of years ago. And it's a 1-year, 30 credit hour degree. But you have to have 6 years of professional, international related experience in order to be admitted. So it is not intended for the students coming straight out. Applications are accepted for it for fall, spring, and summer, which is different than the regular fall entry we do for our program in the MIA. And then students, of course, same idea. They can take the 6 hours of online courses for that additional cost if they want to do that. But there's no internship requirement, no capstone, no foreign language requirement, but there's also no Bush School scholarships for them either. So they are a quicker route, but it's for a executive level, possibly even military experience coming into our program. Now, we have just now begun a new location. We've acquired a location in Washington, D.C., just a couple of blocks from the White House. And we are going to start our international policy there in DC in the spring of this coming year. So they're looking to enroll a handful of students getting started now. But same idea, it's going to start with the MIP-DC, and then we will see what we can expand that to as we grow our enrollment, grow our faculty, and grow our offerings. But that's not an option just quite yet for those of you that want to find yourself in the DC area. All right, so graduate certificates, I'm just going to touch on these for a moment. These are that outside attainment that I was talking about earlier that you can combine with your MIA, that if you, for instance, started the Certificate of Advanced International Affairs on an off cycle or just dipped your toe in the waters to see what these classes are like and you really enjoyed them, then you can take up to 12 credit hours of their coursework and count them towards our MIA. We can do some of the same type of work with the Certificate in Homeland Security because we do have a concentration in that. And then the Certificate in Nonprofit Management might involve a little more talking to your advisors for this, maybe even reaching out to PEG in the International Affairs Department, because we offer an international NGOs, that non-governmental organizations, and that fits a little bit towards our nonprofit area, but you'd have to ensure that the classes align with that concentration in order to make those classes work. So this is a great option for those that want to do it, but you really do have to do a little bit of legwork and just making sure that the classes you're taking will count effectively towards your track and concentrations. Now the CAIA, that Certificate in Advanced International Affairs, is an easy fit because obviously those definitely fit with our concentration and track. Probably the Homeland Security is the next best fit. Certificate in Public Management I didn't talk about just because it goes with the other side of the house with the Master of Public Service, but it is an option for those that are interested in that as well. Okay, so the International Affairs Department, when we're talking about tracks and concentrations, and I'll get our students to chime in here in a second and unmute, but just as a quick overview for this, there are 2 tracks that you are going to declare at the time that you apply, and we actually pretty much have you stick with that throughout the time that you're here. We've had students apply for national security and diplomacy and then change their mind once they're here, and that can be done. But it's difficult for someone to come in and say, I'm interested in IDEP, International Economics, and they start taking classes and realize, nope, 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 I want to do national security and diplomacy. You're already able to mix and match your curriculum, that it probably won't matter, but I don't know that you need to switch your track for that. So just do some thinking, do some talking with people before you apply, because we really typically have you stick with the track that you apply with. So international development, economic policy, national security and diplomacy. And then the concentrations I've color coordinated with those, because you are required to do 2 concentrations and take 3 courses minimum to fulfill that concentration. So for instance, if you're national security and diplomacy, you may choose the cybersecurity policy is one of your areas, and you have to take 3 classes within that heading. And then you can pick anything else for your second concentration. It does not have to be tied to your track. Oftentimes students choose it to be, but it doesn't have to be. So that's where I was talking about earlier. If you're an IDEP student in a track, you only have to take 1 of those concentrations within your track. the other one can be a national security one. So there's a great way of mixing these classes. We did just start a new one this year. We'd already been offering a conference on pandemic preparedness, and then lo and behold, look what happens. And now we're setting with a new concentration that deals directly with what the world is undergoing right now with COVID. So these are very robust areas. There are some faculty members that lead these areas that you can find online. But the curriculum itself is giving you some flexibility in your first year. Between your semesters 1 and 2, you've got to include those core courses, that Bush 631, 606, and 608. And then you're required for 1 track requirement. And then look at that, you get 4 electives that you get to start putting together with your concentrations. And then you do your summer internship or your cultural study. And then you come back from your semester 3 in that fall, and you can do 4 more electives. Or a few people choose to do the study abroad, which we'll talk about later. And then you come in that final semester and you're doing a capstone seminar and 3 electives. So Aaron, real quick before I turn this over, if you're on, you want to go and unmute and talk a little bit about what your experience has been so far, and just tell a little bit about what you're studying and kind of what you've been focused on this last year while you've been doing classes.
Sure, happy to. Hi, everybody. My name is Aaron Rusho. I'm a second-year student at the Bush School. I'm originally from Michigan, and I am studying, I'm on the National Security and Diplomacy track. My concentrations are diplomacy and then conflict and development. I chose these 2 concentrations because coming into the Bush School, I kind of had a pretty specific idea of what I wanted to do afterwards. I had done an internship with the State Department before and was pretty convinced that I wanted to be a Foreign Service officer. So I've approached my time at the Bush School and the classes that I've selected and the concentrations that I've selected to kind of mirror some of the skills and knowledge areas that I want to develop to help myself become a better diplomat when I leave the Bush School and go into the workforce as a Foreign Service officer. So that's kind of how I've prepared things. My time at the Bush School so far has been fantastic. I've had the opportunity to get involved in a lot of different organizations, learn from some really unbelievable professors and faculty members, and grow skills and develop knowledge areas that are going to directly translate to my career. It's a fantastic investment, and I knew fairly quickly after arriving here that I had made the right graduate school decision. So if you have any questions or anything, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
And Aaron, where did you go for undergrad?
I went to Northern Michigan University for undergrad, and I earned a bachelor's in international political science.
Okay. And we do typically find a lot of our students from the liberal arts fields, but not all are. And I do want to emphasize right now, if you do have questions for Aaron, he's going to be on the entire time and can monitor some of the chat questions if you send it out to everyone. But definitely at the end of this, we are going to have more time to talk from the student perspective. But I'm going to keep moving on, and Aaron, I'll grab you in a little bit. So these Capstone team-based consulting projects, this is going to be in your final semester. I believe they do run 1 or 2 in the fall for those that are maybe graduating a semester early because of the certificates or have a unique situation where they need to do that. But most of them are spring options. And you're going to be given a list of about 8 to 10 client options. So it's going to list the name of what they think that project's going to be, the work synopsis, the client itself, the instructor running it, and then the meeting times that they hope to meet. And then you're going to rank order your top 3 or 4 interests, and then those are going to be assigned, usually I believe by the department staff in the MIA. And they're going to just take a look at who's interested in what, the enrollment distributions, the capstone needs, who's got the talents for helping with that if they know. And then they're going to assign that. And typically, just like with the 8 to 10 capstones, there's around 8 to 10 students per, probably a little less, probably 7 to 8 is kind of where they want to cap off on that. Because it is a team project, you want to have enough roles for people to do that work and present. And I'll have Aaron come on in a second, and maybe even Dylan talk a little bit about his, even that's on the other side, of what they're looking for out of the capstone. Aaron, I'm not sure if you've even been given the topics yet, but we'll find out in just a second. But the leadership and writing staff will also come in and work with the capstone groups just to make sure there's a good dynamic, that they're sharing responsibility and roles, and they understand how to work together. And then the clients that you're getting are going to be several different agencies, but they usually mirror what we do for our employment, which is the federal, state, local, nonprofit, private, and so forth. So I've listed the options that I was given from last year, but they don't have the list together yet in this kind of capacity for the fall, sorry, for the spring of 2021. So with that being said, Aaron, have you seen or heard about what potentially may be offered for you guys in the spring?
They have not told us anything. We're eagerly awaiting more information about what our options are.
Okay. All right. Dylan, if you've got a second, I know you're on the other side of the house with the Master of Public Service, but can you talk just briefly about what you guys have done on your end to get started with the Master of Public Service side and what that looked like, just for a couple of minutes?
Sure, no problem at all. So as Catherine explained, all of the professors that oversee the capstones will go through and give brief presentations on each of the capstones, just so you're able to kind of get an idea of the work you will be doing, which really is helpful when it comes time to ranking your preferences. The capstone I'm specifically in is a conservation capstone. Our client is the National Resource Conservation Service, which is a part of the USDA. And for the USDA, we'll be making a comprehensive database of invasive species and also examining how each state addresses invasive species and creating a framework that they can expand throughout the country to ensure that a state and the federal government aren't doing the same exact work. And overall, so far, we've just been meeting with the client a lot, getting our beginning steps down. And the really great thing about a capstone is you spend so much time in class, learning a lot of the theories, learning a lot of the practice. And then later on at your time at the Bush School, you actually have the opportunity to put into practice what you've been learning about. So when you walk away from the Bush School, you have a really great deliverable to show all these great skills that you've perfected during your time at the Bush School.
That's great. Thank you. That was helpful to know just on getting started. And I know the MIA side will have something as robust as what's listed here. But if you do want some of the other listings, you can go to the website at the bottom, and they're listed by year. And if they're missing some of those, if you email me at the Bush School Admissions email address, I'll be happy to send you sheets that have all of these listed from year to year, just to give an example. So I'm going to transition and pass this over to Matt Upton for a minute. And I went too far. There you go. And Matt's going to, I can get this straight. There you go. Matt's going to talk about the student enhancement. And there's a couple of slides. Matt, I'm not sure that you're as used to talking about some of these, but just go for it. And you've got the next 5 slides.
Perfect. Thanks, Catherine. We'll welcome everyone who's on today. I'm going to share with you more about career and student services. I've been here at the Bush School for, I think this starts my 17th year this fall. So I've been around for a while, and we're always looking for ways to enhance the student experience for our students. So our team starts working with you right now with Catherine and Ashley and Justin, and then continues working with you through our leadership development program. Holly Kasperbauer is our assistant director for that program. And they work with you, helping you begin to understand more about yourself, develop some self-awareness through Myers-Briggs type indicator or Strengths Quest, and then also working with you individually to develop an individual leadership plan. The writing program is something that is in place to help you enhance your writing skills. They are not an editing service. The university does have a writing center as well that offers additional resources for graduate students, but we have someone internally who works both with faculty to clarify the learning objectives of writing a statement or writing assignments, and then also to work with you as an individual students as you craft those things so that you can think about who's your audience, what are you trying to convey. There is also an additional writing course that you can participate in It's a 0 credit course, so it acts just like a regular class, but it doesn't cost you anything other than the time and effort to do the work for that class, but it helps you enhance your skills. And then, as Catherine has already mentioned, there is a language requirement for the International Affairs graduate degree, the Master of International Affairs. And so there are some unique opportunities put in place. We have foreign language, the Foreign Language and Culture Society, and they do things like foreign film nights and meals together, highlighting different cuisines from different parts of the world. But they also work together to put you in small groups, working with a native language speaker or someone who is fluent in the language to help you practice your skills and help you get ready to pass that language exam. And then, as Catherine's already mentioned, many people will also do an immersion during the summer and then come back and take that exam. So I'll let you move to the next slide. Catherine's getting it there. I saw it. So yeah, and we normally have a number of speakers and conferences that are in person. This year, thankfully, most of those speakers and conference opportunities have been shifted to being virtual like everyone else around the world. And so there are plenty of opportunities to do that and to participate in the speakers that are coming here. Erin is head of our Ambassador Council. It's one of our student organizations that hosts the different speakers and works to serve as ushers and hosts for people that are coming into the different conferences and speakers that are coming through the different research institutes and research centers. There are international travel opportunities. Those are study abroad. So those are associated with course credit. So that's nice because you'll walk away being able to get course credit for a trip. Those obviously did not happen this last spring like they normally would, but typically those happen either over the winter break between the fall and the spring semester, or early on in May, right after the spring semester is ended. So hopefully by the time all of you get here in the fall of 2021, headed into the summer of 2022, we'll be back up and running with all of those. I know international airports are starting to open back up. And then we have a number of research institutes and centers and programs that are working to provide opportunities for students if you want to enhance your research skills or your involvement in any of the topical issues that they are involved with, whether that's the Scowcroft Institute of International Affairs, the Intelligence Studies Program, the Program on Women, Peace, and Security, and you can see the others that are listed here today. They do have opportunities, research opportunities, sometimes graduate assistantships as well. And they also, some of them also offer funding for internship opportunities. One of those is the Mosbacher Institute for Trade. They actually have a program where you can apply to receive funding to do an internship either abroad or in DC. And they offer a pretty nice stipend, $10,000 for an international internship and $7,500 for a domestic internship in the area of trade and commerce. So those are things that you can apply for as a student. Most people come to graduate school with hopes of improving their career prospects. And so our students are no different. And you can see here just a quick breakdown of where our students go. Historically, students in the International Affairs program, anywhere from 50 to 75% are going into federal government work. Not always in the Washington, D.C. area, but oftentimes there is a large group that heads to DC. And I encourage people, when you look at these statistics here, to go ahead and add the government contractor percentage to the federal contractor or the federal number, because they're typically, our government contractors that our graduates are going to work for are typically working for the federal government. So you can see 56% the class of 2019, 54% the year before that, and 62% going to work in the federal government. Private sector, a little bit higher here. For a number of years, we had a specific concentration in transfer pricing that is not in existence now. And so that's why you saw a lot of people go into the private sector, nonprofits and NGOs. And then you'll see that from year to year, we have students in the International Affairs program go into state and local government work. Oftentimes they're doing work in the areas of cybersecurity, or intelligence, business intelligence, those types of things. In major metropolitan areas, if they're working in local government, they could also be working for a port authority in a different place, and so that gives you an idea. And then very few, but a few do go into continuing education. That's typically either going to be a law degree or a PhD program. But you'll see that number is usually that 10% in 2018. That was a little bit of an anomaly, higher than what we normally see continue their education post the Bush School. Most of the time, people think of their Master of International Affairs degree as a terminal degree, unless you're deciding you want to go into academia or some other field that requires an additional graduate degree or a PhD. So just to give you an idea of where our students go to work, they're working for all of the intelligence agencies that you can imagine. We just have a couple of them listed here: National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, CIA, FBI, the Northwest National Lab, Pacific Northwest National Lab runs a national nuclear security program. We've had a number of students who've gone into that program. That's actually run by the Department of Energy, and those individuals are still working there. Some of those people that started there have now moved over to the State Department or to other intelligence or defense agencies. So you can see there, we're really sending graduates to the areas that you would expect to see students who are studying national security to go. Government contractors, Banyan Risk Group, Booz Allen Hamilton's a well-known one. Chemonics Internationally is a well-known contractor for international development. Cone Resnick actually has a pretty strong office in Houston that has hired our graduates in the past. They're doing emergency management, disaster relief type work there. So it gives you a decent idea of where they're going to work, where our graduates are going to work when they're finishing up. Private sector, some of them are going into consulting work. You see things like Deloitte and Ernst & Young and KPMG, PricewaterhouseCoopers. Those are the ones that were hiring those transfer pricing students in the past. But that's shifted a little bit out of what we're doing now, what we're concentrating on in the International Affairs Department. State and local government, you can see some of the places that they're working for, and then nonprofit organizations, everything from research or think tank institutions like the Brookings Institution, or other places that are similar to that, like American Enterprise Institute. So it gives you a decent idea. Those employers are going to be the same thing for our internships. That's where many of our students are interning in very similar organizations and oftentimes the same organizations. Okay, it's back to you, Catherine.
Yep, and so before, Matt's going to be heading out for another event, but I wanted to remind you guys, he will be presenting his own webinar in the next couple of weeks. So he can get into more detail about the internships or some of the funding that's involved with that at a later time. But if you do need to reach out to him before, if you just chat with me right here, some of the things I can do, but I can also put you in touch with him directly if you want to have a conversation with him. So thank you, Matt, appreciate it. And I'm going to transition now to the MIA application requirements and the steps and timeline for this. So as it is with all these options that you're looking for to apply for grad school, is going to require an application and fee, a statement of purpose, a resume, a transcript. I noticed I left off the international experience essay, my apologies. That's just a separate document for you to be able to talk about your travel, language, experiences in a separate document away from your statement. The GRE test is optional for most people, but if you are encouraged, I'll say again, I put this wrong. So it's optional for those that are above a 3.2. My apologies, I copied this from the MPSA and didn't fix it. So you are required to have that GRE test if you are below a 3.2. And it is correct on the website, so follow that, not this. And then international applicants, English proficiency proof have to be given to us. That can be met in a number of ways. Also need to get 3 letters of rec, so be lining up who you would like to have recommend. Typically for younger students, that's going to be a little more heavy on the faculty side or advisors, some more academic, whereas someone's been out for a few years, you're going to tend to rely more on professional work experience, a recommender for that. The application steps and timelines. So definitely we have put a new, quicker timeline on this. In December is now our priority deadline For years, it was in January, and we were just killing ourselves trying to get these applications in a good enough state for faculty to be able to look at these by mid-January. So we have just asked if you guys can send those materials to us a little sooner, gives us a little bit of time over the holiday to gather up these resources and put them together. Our hard deadline is now January 15th, rather than the priority at that time. And that, again, is going to give us time to get those applications all put together in front of faculty, be able to move to our next step of the interviews without still trying to process late applications coming in. Now, we have the option to make a later deadline if we feel like the applications aren't where they need to be. But MIA usually doesn't have that need. Most of the time, we are wrapped up by that hard deadline, whatever it is. So be sure you meet that timeline. We're going to start contacting students in late January if they've moved to the next round, which is our interview phase. We conduct interviews via Zoom or Skype or phone, or if we're able to do it in person in the spring. Haven't quite canceled all this yet, but there are some logistics involved with space that I need that right now Texas A&M is using to hold classes for their larger classes over in the conference center auditoriums. So I'm not sure yet if we will do it, but for now, just put this date on your calendar. But February 26th and 27th is typically when we invite people to come to campus and we do the interviews in person, along with a number of options for alumni interactions with a Q&A, a time to meet and talk with our current students through a Q&A and just individual visits. You're hearing about the language program. You're hearing about the student services support that we have directly from the people who are running it. So it's a great opportunity to visit campus if we can do it. So we'll see how that pans out as we go a little further into this process. March, we give those admissions and aid decisions at the same time. So that's typically going to be around by March 10th, 12th, that you'll hear from us with an offer, hopefully not a denial. But in April, you have to get back to us with a decision, and that's an April 15th national deadline date. So all schools that you've heard from by then, you'll have to respond to by that April 15th and let us all know if we've won your loyalty or if you've gone somewhere else, which we quite understand. This is a competitive market. So hopefully you'll get admitted to all the schools that you apply to. So the MIA and MPH application requirements is a little bit different because you're having to apply both to us and to MPH at the same time, which is that Sophus app is what they use. So the internal app for us is a little bit different than traditionally what people do through Unicast, because it's an internal app that you're doing just for us that supplements the one that you're having to pay for Sophus. So if you're MIA-MPH, then you're doing this route. Still requires the statement, still requires that international experience essay that I forgot to put on here. Still requires the GRE if you're below a 3.2 that I didn't put on here. And English proficiency proof, you still have to have that as part of this because it is part of the MIA program. The application steps and timeline for them is a little bit different because we're having to go with what MPH is offering. So it's a February 1st deadline for them. And we'll start to review applications as they come in. Same idea, if it's early enough and we can get you invited to interview with us, we'll do that in February, decision in March. You have to let us know by April 15th if you're coming or not with both us and MPH. And then all this information is found online under the admissions degrees section. So INTA by the numbers, if you're curious where you match up or what you look like as an undergrad student, these were our numbers for the incoming class. I did go ahead and include the MIP. I didn't really say much about the IA-MPH because we only have the one student coming and I didn't want to differentiate that one poor student with her scores. So I'm going to talk more about the MIA. The enrollment, we ended up hitting around that 90 mark, but you can imagine with the fallout with COVID, we did lose a few students who decided to defer or to stay in their job and will either come to us in a future timeline or they're just going to stay where they are and reapply in the future time. So we're actually have 83 students incoming this year, fall with a couple of people for spring who deferred based off their situation. Typically doesn't happen very often, but we can do that. Average GPA was almost a 3.7 for this class. Average GRE was a 3.09. And that was it's about half of our applicants submitting a GRE. Even those that had a really strong file, many of them had already taken the GRE and went ahead and reported those too, because in some capacity, they may affect a little bit on the funding. So we felt like if we tell people, if you've got a good GRE score and you think it's going to help your application, submit those scores for sure. If you don't feel like testing is a strength for you and it might hold you back with a good GPA, then don't submit the scores. Or if you have them sent to us, contact us in the admissions office and we can pull those from your file. And if you want to have that discussion with us one-on-one, we will be happy to talk to you about that as well. I know that GRE test causes a lot of anxiety for people. So we really do have it optional above the 3.2, however. Average age for this incoming class was 23. Women was 57%, which is more than what it typically is. Usually we're sitting right around that 45 to 50%. So this year, more women came in. Minority percentage is looking good. We have about 27% of our students are underserved minority groups. International percentage, we're usually around 10% no matter what the situation with COVID is. So that was right on target. And then non-residents, we usually are the opposite for this. Non-residents is usually around 60%. But this year, again, those were the ones that were sometimes affected with the situation and staying closer to home because of the situation. And so we got a few more declines than we typically had. So 41% are non-resident from Texas, not from Texas. Average work experience, we get a lot of questions about, do we require a certain number of years of work experience? We don't require it. We like to see it, but we're not going to turn away good, strong undergrads if you know what you're looking for and know what you want to do. It just makes more sense a lot because of where we're located, not in a major metropolitan area. We can't bring in a lot of students mid-career level in the MIA. Typically, they head towards the MIP for that. So we do have 75% of our students are here within a year or two. And then it goes up a little bit, 14% right there, and then 11% a few more years out, like 5+ years. Typically see that coming in some of our international students who've been working for a couple of years and maybe being sponsored by their home countries coming. But MIP, I'm not going to really talk about their numbers, but they're here. But we only brought in 8 students this year for that department, which is typical. We're usually around that 10 mark. So you can see there's a little bit different. But you're learning from both seasoned practitioners and from the academic researchers. So it's a good mix of students learning from people who have been doing the work in the field that they desire. And an average class size is somewhere around 16. There's some classes that hit closer to the 10 mark. Some cap out at around 16 to 18 because of the nature of the work that they're doing in those classes with the writing and the interactions. Some of the classes will get up in the 20s or 30s. Erin, for just a second, can you talk a little bit about that? How big are the classes that you've seen that you've been taking typically, even from first year versus maybe these second year classes?
I think in some of the required courses that everybody has to take, those are generally on the larger side. And by larger side, I mean capped at 25 at the absolute maximum. But I've also been in classes with less than 10 students. And I think the average probably is right around that 15 to 16 mark, especially when you get into your concentrations a little bit and start to take more specialized classes from a topic perspective. I think that's right about the normal range you're going to find. And then the other factor that I'll mention too are some of the really popular practitioners like Professor Olson or Ambassador Napper. Their classes are really popular and for a really good reason. They're amazing. I can't recommend both of them enough. And so they're going to have a little bit larger class sizes too. But I think as a general rule of thumb, that the average sounds pretty good. You're going to have some that are a little bit smaller. I've had multiple classes with less than 10, and that's really great. But probably about 20, 25 is where the maximum will be. So you're definitely getting that close interaction with the professor in a fairly small class setting.
Great, thank you. So I want to make sure that we finish on time, so I'm going to run through this, but an important aspect I know for everyone is the cost and aid. So we reward every admitted MIA student with a scholarship, and the same would be true for those coming in the public health, at least for the time that they're with us. They are going to receive some level of funding. And the benefit is when we're doing that, we can also issue those tuition waivers for those that are coming in from out of state. So in Aaron's case, coming in from Michigan, he can come in with that waiver, and he's saving that additional $12,000. So 100% of our students from this year's class coming in receive scholarship. I put the $1,000, but typically we don't go that low. There's a few that might do that, especially if they got unique circumstances. But most of the time we start at that $3,000 award. That was about 35% of this incoming class. Another 35% got the $5,000 award, which is typically where I put our average is about. And then you got another 15% with 10,000 or more. And then there's quite a few really good awards that we have that rewards another 15%. And those awards are typically the Robertson Awards, the Diversity Awards that Texas A&M gives, Grad Merit Award. I'm not mentioning the Coverdell with that. Coverdell's a little bit differently, but that is a new one that we have now started granting with the Peace Corps members. For those that choose to pursue the Coverdell Scholarship, we can name it for that. They just have to do a unique internship to fulfill their needs for it. Now, we don't present grad assistantships to our first year students. They're only available to second year students. So if a student is interested in converting, they can apply for those grad assistantships in the spring of their first year, so that by the time they come in for their second year, they can choose to do a grad assistantship. But if they do, they have to give up their first year scholarship. So typically, if you're a 15,000 or more winner, you're not going to take a GA position, because the GA position is probably closer to about 13,500 to 14,000. But you also have to work the 20 hours a week for that. But they're across the gamut of the school, from the institutes to the staff and to some of the faculty, in doing research work for them. And then earlier we had mentioned, when Matt was talking about the internships, if you get one that is unpaid, there's an opportunity for you to apply for internship funding, and it's based on the location of where you're headed. But you do have to attend some career workshops in order to qualify for those. So when it's all said and done, the out-of-state tuition waivers that help you guys put you right at the Texas rate right now is running close to $13,200 per year for tuition and fees, and that's before your scholarship kicks in. Kind of works weirdly because your waiver has to kick in, but when it's all said and done, cost of living is about $21,000 to live here in Bryan-College Station. Some do find more economical places to live and sharing, but we will put that information up on a Facebook group for the incoming class, and then they can start contacting each other if looking for roommates or recommendations for certain apartment complexes and duplexes. So this opportunities for involvement. Dylan, if you just want to talk very quickly and cover some of this, and then we'll take questions right after.
Yeah, no problem at all. So there are plenty of student organizations that are very active here in the Bush School, especially active when, you know, not everything that's going on in the world is going on. I'm just going to highlight a few of them really quickly. The Public Service Organization, PSO, that's the student org that really lives true to the service side of everything we do at the Bush School. They're very active in the Bryan-College Station community and really work to just give back to the community. The Student Government Association, which I am president of currently, is exactly what it sounds like. It's the Student Government Association of the Bush School. We do a ton of different things. We, at the most basic level, we advocate for the students when it comes to different issues. We also plan different fun events like Gala, Dillo, and we also have a tailgate when it's safe to tailgate. And a few of our different committees are listed out there. Let's see. I'm going to let Aaron talk about the Ambassadors Council in a sec, just because he is in charge of that. We also have Bushwhacker Athletics here at the Bush School, which is our intramural team that SGA runs. It's just another fun way to get involved. And yeah, I'm going to turn it over to Aaron to let him talk for just a sec about the Ambassadors Council, as he is in charge of it and will be able to do a better job than me.
Sure. So the Ambassadors Council is a really great way to get involved in the Bush School. The main prerogative of the Ambassadors Council is to be the student representatives of the Bush School, as well as President Bush's life and legacy. So our main function is representing the Bush School at all of those events that are normally in person, that Catherine mentioned earlier. However, we also do some service things and kind of take opportunities to reflect on President Bush's life and leadership and how we can represent that in our daily lives. We also work very closely with the Dean's office. He's one of our best partners at the Bush School, and he'll have us meet with donors or other individuals that are coming to visit or are interested in the Bush School, and we kind of have the opportunity to be the student face of that. So that's a little bit about the Ambassadors Council, and if you wish to hear more, feel free to send me a private message in the chat.
I'm just putting here the recap because I like to have this up in case you guys have questions and this ends up being something that jogs your memory. But I see there was a question about language requirement for applying to the program. No, you don't have to have language coming to the program in order to take that test immediately. We're just expecting that typically our students do have something in their background, whether it be because they've lived abroad or they had a major or a minor in a language, or they just did it on the side. So sometimes it depends on the interviewer. They may ask more questions about that. But really, we've got a question on the application that just wants to know where you are, if you're beginner, you're intermediate, what you've been working on. Because we don't want you to say, I have no language at all. Because if you're that person and you're coming to this program and you do all 16 classes and don't pass that exam, you don't get a diploma. You graduate with an empty tube. So it's just important that you do have language and you start working on it so that during the interview you can talk about what you've been doing for that. So are there any other questions? Feel free just to unmute yourself and let's hear if there's one or two before we sign off.
I have a question, ma'am.
Yes.
In terms of the summer internships, is there like a way to work, because I'll be in the National Guard, so I'll have that summer requirement. Do the internships work with the Guard requirements?
Yes. We often have something similar to that with military requirements. So yes, you will work with the department and the Career Services Office to ensure that, and in fact, sometimes they can take that in place of, just depending on the circumstance. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And I see another question. There was one that says an additional cost for earning a graduate certificate or if we are combining with an MIA. It depends on how it's being done. If you're doing it concurrently with the MIA, remember this can't be the Certificate of Advanced International Affairs unless you've already started it ahead of time. But as long as you're taking our classes as part of your curriculum, you're already paying for that through that. So you're not having to pay the additional online cost unless it is an online class, in which case you're then going to be charged that $1,500 for it. So we can get into more detail for this, but yes, we have a number of students who will just align their courses that also align with the certificate for no additional cost, as long as you're taking them in class. Anybody else want to unmute and ask a question or two?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'll go first. Would there be an opportunity to speak with students? Thank you very much, Erin, but would there be like a one-on-one virtual session or anything like that to speak with other students and just to see how they fit into this Bush School?
So I'm going to jump here on this slide and show you there's two things. There's one that's coming up called Student Life on October the 1st. So they're going to run that session. So I'll have several different topics that kind of go through a slideshow, but it's going to be Dylan bringing in a couple of different students to talk about different perspectives of student life. So you can hear from that. But if you've got specific questions for them uniquely, there's these Zoom Q&A hours that I have set up. And Wednesday, September 23rd and Wednesday, October the 7th is also an availability just to drop in for Zoom and ask your questions. We'll basically just have it up as a waiting room, and we'll just bring you in and answer those kinds of questions, depends on what you have. So you can do that, or you can even just email me, and I'm going to give you this email again. That's bushschooladmissions@TAMU with your questions, and I can put you in touch directly with Dylan or Aaron or whomever to ask those questions specifically to what you are wanting to know about. So you just tell me in your email what it is you need to know, and we'll get you to the right person. All right, I know that, was there one other that had a question? Alexa?
Yeah, I had a question. Thank
Okay.
you. Would it be possible to talk with like a faculty advisor for the tracks specifically? Just because I'm interested in sort of research and what would be involved in some of the academic tracks.
So my recommendation for that is twofold. One, the easiest one is to email me at Bush School Admissions with what it is you're wanting from that faculty member or that interest area, and then I can find the right person for that and send it with an introduction of going, she attended our webinar and has some additional questions. I'm passing this off to you. Can you please help? And that is one way to transition it. The other is if you go to our website and you look up the faculty directory, or go under the academics section where it lists all the tracks and concentrations, it tells who leads that concentration, for instance. So if it was diplomacy, it would be Ambassador Napper. And you can feel free to email them specifically, but usually doing an introduction first. Hello, Professor Napper, I've attended recently a webinar and I've got some additional questions that might be directly related to you. Do you have a few minutes to either answer these questions via email, or is there a time that we can do a Zoom call or a phone call? And just put it out there for them and let them respond to you with their answer. So there's two ways to handle that.
All right, I'll probably be emailing you shortly then.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, is there time for one more question? Otherwise, I will sign off. But I do want to plug one more time, in case anybody else wants to do this, just unmute yourself and I'll see you in a second. But we do have these upcoming events that are still pending. So I've worked on the MIP presentation for another 2 weeks, and then the students will come in. When I talk about admissions, or Matt does the career development, we're going to do much more in depth than what we're doing here. So be more about maybe this personal statement, or about how funding works, particularly with different websites, or just the overview of grad funding. So just know this is not going to be necessarily a repeat of the same things. They'll be shorter, but more direct. And then definitely drop in for those Zoom Q&As. All right, any other questions? All right, so I don't have too much dead time. I will say thank you guys for attending. Sorry I started this without unmuting myself. And we appreciate your time today, and be sure to reach out to us at that bushschooladmissions@tamu.edu or our phone number there, and we'll be happy to answer any direct concerns or questions with you. And we appreciate your time. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.